Welcome to the 64th edition of the Libero podcast. Now, will you still need us? Will you still feed us when we're rabbiting on about football's military-industrial complex? We're here, of course, to talk about the most important of the least important things. I think I've got that the right way around. As Manfred Weisleder once told Paul McCartney as he set off for an SV Hamburg home game. He was the owner of the Star Club. Look it up. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Uwe Seeler and the lads. Master of the back header, I think, Jonathan, is that right?
Uwe Seeler, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the back header, a lost art. Another master of the back header I recall was Charlie Roberts from your Wilsonian age from the 30s. There you go. Learn something new every day, don't you? But anyway, we're here to talk about the world's biggest domestic fixture. Self-styled biggest fixture in the world, but actually it probably is, you know. I'm sorry, Old Firm fans, or Glasgow Derby, if you will, if you prefer to adhere to Scottish company law. Apologies, those countries have a Classique, a Clasico, even a Super Clasico, which Jonathan knows all about. There can only be one. Yes, the El Clasico. Real Madrid, Barcelona, as a fixture will be this Sunday. Here, as I've mentioned before, I've got Jonathan Wilson. We've also got Tariq Panja of the New York Times. Tariq is somewhere in the Stoke Newington Media Village. I think that's right, isn't it, Tariq?
Closer to you than Mr. Wilson.
Yes, well, I was going to say, Jonathan is tired and emotional. This is his last stand in Buenos Aires. Libero's answer to Kenneth Griffith, again, look him up. Did you do the tango in the night last night?
I didn't do the tango. I did have a very good steak, and we finished filming last night after 2.5 grueling weeks, and then we went and celebrated. And I am tired, it's fair to say, and I got a flight in I've got to be at the airport in 3 hours. So,
how much meat over these, was it 12 days, 10 days you've been there? How much of a cow do you think you've...
How much meat? A lot, like an unbelievable amount. So you go around with the crew and you go and like do a couple of interviews or like, you know, the introductory shot things. We call them competitive. I realized I didn't know the English word for it, but like where I'm sort of stand in front of some whales and go, well, perhaps you're wondering why I'm standing in front of some whales. Well, let me tell you why these are relevant. And you do that in the morning, and then you go and you eat a parishada for lunch. You have this, you go to the long table, and it's just heaped up with meat. I don't know how. I mean, like how Argentinians aren't all dying aged about 30 from cholesterol-related issues. I've got no idea. Well, maybe they are. I don't know. They have a bit really salted as well, so it's a very, very unhealthy lifestyle. Anyway, I have newfound respect for people who do documentaries and things. I always thought that was the easy job, and us having to write was difficult, but it turns out their job's quite hard as well.
So you're on your way back. Vegan Wilson.
I mean, I'm quite a vegetarian anyway. I probably only eat meat twice a week, as it is. So I think I've eaten meat more in the last sort of 2.5 weeks than in the rest of the year put together.
So you've been Libero's Jeremy Clarkson. Actually, it was a steak, of course.
Oh, thanks ever so much.
Yes. Well, you know, now you've got newfound respect for Jeremy's TV making qualities. Anyway, I'm John Brewin. I'm John Brewin of The Guardian, often, and other places, sometimes. But before we begin our discussion, time to actually ask you to join our discussion. It really does help us if you comment on our Spotify page and our YouTube page, and also the usual like and subscribe on whatever platform you choose. It really helps us move along, and we've got plans for the future, and we hope you want to be part of those. So thanks so far for your interaction. Keep it going. Right. Okay. So La Liga. Yeah, and it's interesting we should do it and it is a Wednesday morning, we shall admit. Some big news broke overnight, and that's that the Barcelona Villarreal game that was set to be in Miami, that's off because of protests in Spain. A rather pained announcement from La Liga's PR team, and I'll read a little bit of it. And it's quite pointed. Actually, it shows a couple of points that we've made over this podcast about the La Liga's standing in the global market, and it is about the global market. So it says an increasingly competitive global landscape where leagues such as the Premier League or competitions like the UEFA Champions League continue to expand their reach and ability to generate revenue. Initiatives like this are essential to ensure the stability and growth of Spanish football. Renouncing such opportunities hinders the generation of new income, limits clubs' capacity to invest and compete, and reduces the international projection of the entire Spanish soccer system. Tariq, what do you say to that?
Quite a mouthful is what I'll say to that. But look, this is something La Liga have been trying to do since 2018. And then it went through all sorts of court cases. The American business that was going to promote this, Relevant, which is, funny enough, has become UEFA's partner for the Champions League, owned by Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins. They took FIFA to court because it was FIFA that essentially blocked this initially, FIFA and UEFA, and they settled out of court. Once that happened, everyone thought this was going to go ahead. And that's the direction of travel. UEFA, through gritted teeth about a week ago, well, apparently through gritted teeth, is their partner Relevant after all, saying, yeah, they're going to allow this, but they want rules for the future. So it looked like this thing is going to happen. So what we've seen since then, we've seen this past weekend of Spanish games, all the competing teams, including Barcelona's players in their game against Girona, standing still for 15 seconds after kickoff as a protest to the game. But what we've had, and we're going to talk about the Clasico, we also had Real Madrid. Real Madrid have been extremely opposed to this game, and they took legal action. They've gone to a special sports court in Spain, and they said this is anti-competitive. By that they mean it's not fair. Effectively, Barcelona will get one more home game. This is Villarreal's home game that was going to move to the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. But guess who everyone's going to be supporting? They ain't going to be supporting Villarreal, are they? So Barcelona effectively get one more home game. And while this is all going on, none of this has been resolved. It was the promoter, Relevant, that said, given the uncertainty here, and the kickoff is so close, it's supposed to be in December, we're pulling the plug here. I wonder if there's any politics with UEFA as well, their partner, and other things. But the question I would have is this really going to move the needle? Like the statement you read there from La Liga saying in this competitive landscape, you got to do this stuff. One La Liga game going to Miami, what does that do in terms of, eating the Premier League's cake or getting some of that competitive TV money away from the Champions League for La Liga? I was surprised this is going to go ahead, or this was the plan. I'm not so sure, but it's not going to happen now.
I suppose the example that you would cast it against is that of the NFL, that, on a Sunday in London these days, you'll see a selection of, let's say, broad-shouldered people dressed in NFL gear all over the Tube network as they're off to White Hart Lane, Tottenham Hotspur or Wembley. That's been quite successful for NFL, I think, particularly getting the European audience in. But it feels it's a slightly different scenario. NFL is dominant in its sport. La Liga is pushing, because it felt like it's lost ground against the Premier League and Champions League, as that statement says. Now, my instinct here, Tariq, and am I wrong? I do get the feeling that obviously it's Senor Tebas is behind this, isn't he? Real Madrid taking him on, that feels like something they'd like doing. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. This is a really funny relationship. Funny enough, Tebas is a member of Real Madrid. He's a Real Madrid fan, but his continually up against his nemesis, which is Florentino Perez, whether it was a Super League or everything else. And in a weird way, it's like Barcelona's in the middle of all of this. Same with UEFA as well, with Florentino trying to pull Barcelona towards them as well, because Real Madrid need Barcelona as much as Barcelona need the Clasico, and all these two teams need each other in a way that gives them this prominence as well. We'll talk about that. And then on the other hand, you've got La Liga or UEFA. And, last week we had Juan Laporta, the president of Barcelona, rejoining the European Club Association, or the European Football Clubs, whatever it's called now.
Everton FC, yeah.
Everton FC. And that is a sign as well. Of course, they were booted out with Real Madrid and Juventus as the last three holdovers from the Super League. So there's always been that pull and push, and it's been Tebas versus Florentino all the time. And Real Madrid have been opposed to this fixture since it was designed. Barcelona, on the other hand, have been the club that they wanted to send overseas. I think the initial game was going to be Barca against Atletico Madrid, which is a bigger fixture than Villarreal, obviously, and that was what they were going to do. Yeah, I think this is that. And Tebas is a funny guy in the sense, in England we have Richard Masters. We hardly see him. We never really hear him. In Spain, you always see and hear Tebas and beyond, this bombastic figure who is like fighting with everyone all of the time about something, and usually with Florentino Perez. It's that is the dynamic that has been in Spain for the last half a decade, if not longer.
Jonathan, both of us will remember the 39th game debate, which 20 odd years ago or so. It was Phil Gartside.
Is this always that?
Yeah, he's getting on for Phil Gartside, the Bolton chairman at the time, wasn't it, that was leading this campaign. It was the Premier League, smaller Premier League clubs felt that they could conquer a global audience by doing this. And obviously it was something that fans protested against. It never happened. But it's always felt that the Premier League at a certain point wanted to do something like this. But now the Premier League is so successful, they feel no need to do this. They have the pre-season event. What's your take on this?
Well, I think there's also like the attitudes and behaviours of domestic fans. So it seems to me that in Spain, the fans of clubs other than Barcelona and Real Madrid essentially don't count. And fans of those clubs don't really care about the league as a whole. They just want what's best for what they perceive to be best for their club. So if they can generate more revenue by having one of their away games played even further away, they seem fine with that. In the same way Spanish fans, broadly speaking, seem fine with the Super League. Whereas I think, the Super League's a good example of it. I wish English fans were more organised, but they are significantly more organised and aware of social issues than Spanish fans, not as much as German fans, for instance. So I think the Premier League recognises the opposition they'd face internally. I mean, the other factor here is the US. I don't see how this is good for US football. It might be good for specific fans in Miami, those who can afford tickets. But that's not actually that many people. You're talking about 80,000 people, whatever the capacity of that stadium is. Yeah, and it's a weird ongoing feature of US football that there's so much greater interest in friendlies involving foreign sides, or in this case will be a league game involving a foreign side, than in their domestic game. And I've done a load of work on the American Soccer League, which ran from 1921 through to 1933, before being reborn in a slightly different form. And even in that era, the US was the first place to have a professional league outside of the UK, which I think it makes so little sense in the current landscape. But I think it's worth reiterating. They got a professional league before Austria, before Czechoslovakia, before Hungary. And yet it never really came to anything, because the thing people wanted to watch was big European teams or South American teams coming to play, largely in New York. So the biggest crowd to watch a game of soccer in the US until Pele went to the Cosmos was a New York 11 playing against Hakoach, the great Zionist team of Vienna in, I think, 1926. I might have a year or two out, but so mid to late 20s anyway. We got 46,000 at the Polo Grounds. It seems even now that the European teams going on these preseason tours get bigger crowds than MLS. And I don't understand why that is. I don't understand why friendlies seem so much more interesting to them than their own league.
What's weird is some of those friendlies got more higher attendance than the Club World Cup, which was also played in the US. And the logic behind that is they only want the biggest names, and maybe the Club World Cup didn't attract all of the biggest names, Liverpool, Napoli, Barca, etc. weren't there. But to Jonathan's point, they've noticed this as well. Like one of the people or one of the groups that I suppose need to say yes from a football point of view, CONCACAF, which is the governing body for the region in North America, they've said that they've not given their blessing to this at all. And to be honest, they've been telling everyone, briefing everyone, this is terrible. This is terrible for North American football. And also, it's potentially the thin end of the wedge where, it's like, is this going to be just this one-off game? Or then, oh, look, La Liga is getting very close to Saudi Arabia, for example. There's lots of sponsorship deals over there, and they've got a TV deal in Qatar. And where are they going to go to those regions as well? Or are these teams going to give up all these games? Then you've got the question of, and I think, Wilson, you went to this game, you had the Libertadores final played in Spain. Now, what will the South American teams do? They've got investors and owners who'll be looking, or club presidents who'll be looking at this as well and say, hang on, we can make a lot of money in North America and Europe as well. And then suddenly the club game is blown up in the way we know it.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the last 2.5 weeks with the current River president, Jorge Brito, and with two of his predecessors, and the man I think will win the election in November and succeed him, Ticalo. They are bright, forward-thinking people who have, I think, done incredible things, actually. You're always wary when you spend a lot of time with people. Like, am I just hearing what they're telling me? But if you look at El Monumental now, it is completely transformed from when I was last there in 2018. And it's been transformed in a very sensitive way. The Populares, the terraces, the ends are still there. But the rest of it, the benches have been replaced by proper seats. The security is way better. The capacity's been increased from just over 60,000 to 85,000. The way they do the ticketing and everything is absolutely state of the art. And basically, it's Brito, when lockdown happened, he realized this is actually an opportunity for us. We're not going to make any money from fans. So we will, in the next sort of 8-9 months, we will redevelop the stadium. And when they come back, they'll suddenly have this great new stadium, 85,000 capacity. River have the highest average attendance in the world. Higher than Borussia Dortmund, higher than Bayern Munich, higher than Madrid or the Milan clubs or United. So I think they would not move it, and it would move a Super Clasico. But I can completely see Boca wanting to do it because Boca have a slightly decrepit 55,000 capacity stadium. They're losing the financial battle against River. I think it's fair to say that Riquelme, as the sort of leading political figure there, is maybe his sort of identification with fans would say, no, we can't do this. But there'd definitely be financial pressure to do it. And given that South American football is incredibly good, I mean, good in a bad way, at putting on the fixtures people want to see. So they will create reasons to have playoffs for anything, just another game. You can't have too many Super Clásicos. You can't have too many Copa Americas. The idea that you might sort of invent the way their league works. I mean, I don't know if anybody's bothered to follow this. Don't, because it's mind-blowingly complex. the Argentinian league, which still has the sort of apertura clausura system, but it's two groups of 15, and you play everybody in your group, but also your designated rival, you play them twice, you play everybody else once. And at the end of that, the top 8 from each of these groups of 15 go into a knockout system. And then you do that again in the second half of the season. So they managed to guarantee themselves 4 Super Clásicos, or 4 games between Racing and Independiente, or 4 games between No Can and San Lorenzo, or 4 games between Central and Newell's. Which is a bit, people like Vélez going, oh, we haven't got a rival. Why can't we have a proper rival? San Lorenzo, don't you? Hey, yes, San Lorenzo go, no, we ain't can. But they've just invented a system that guarantees them 4 big games every 4 like derbies a season. So I'm sure they could find a reason to add in 2 more and play them in Miami, Los Angeles, or whatever. But the broader point is absolutely right, that as corrupting as this is, or it appears to be to me, to US football, the knock-on effect for other leagues who be attracted by the wealth of the US and attracted by the various communities within the US could be absolutely devastating.
Jonathan now with an in-depth view of Argentinian football. More later, another time, actually. It sounds fascinating, Jonathan. You're the expert here on that. Even more of one after your 2 weeks tangoing in the night. But let's be frank here, Tariq. If you are relevant or another company that's looking to, stage these games, be the promoter essentially of this, the game that the USA or Saudi Arabia or whichever venue around the world which prepares, they would love the Clasico, wouldn't they? They'd love the Clasico in their country. That's the crown jewels. Now, the fact that Real Madrid aren't for it suggests that it might not happen. But for La Liga, this fixture is the crown jewels because, and actually, as a domestic fixture, I was trying to work out a parameter for this, and the only one I could find really is that, and maybe the old firm would be similar. It's like you only people around the world probably only watch 2 Liga games. The majority of people, La Liga games every season, and they are the 2 Clasico Liga fixtures, or whichever ones that are done in the Super Copa or maybe in the Copa del Rey, perhaps even in the Champions League. But it reminds me of rugby league. The state of origin, Queensland versus New South Wales. I only ever watch, and actually do have 3 of them, I only ever watch Australian Rugby League when it's that fixture, and it is high quality, and that's the sort of the reach of, that's the crown jewels of Australian Rugby League, such as it is. And La Liga now, because you don't have the strength of the La Liga that we had, as we entered this century. So you had your Deportivo, your Rafa Benitez, Valencia, and other forces in La Liga. It's just broken down. You've got Atletico the third way, who weren't particularly impressive this week. But it's Real Madrid and Barcelona. That brand has broken through. First question, a simple one. Is it still the world's biggest domestic fixture?
Yeah, and I think for the reasons you've explained, although Mr. Tebas, if you want to complain to anyone, you can contact John wherever he is. These are the only 2 games anyone's going to watch in Spain.
I watch Spanish football every week, but I do enjoy it. But I'm talking about the majority of people. People, if that, say you walk past your local pub that will have Arsenal versus Atletico Madrid or whatever, they will put, you can watch La Liga here. You watch that, but that's the one game that a pub is going to attract people to, right?
Yeah. You'll pop your head in and then maybe stay for a bit. And there is, and it kind of has to be because of these factors. I mean, you mentioned those teams as well. Those classic teams and those classic hits, those classic names. You mentioned Depor, Celta de Vigo as well, and it was more competitive before as well as an environment. We'll get on to what Barcelona is now, but they weren't always winning. This is kind of a modern phenomenon that these 2 teams always win everything. That's not really the story of Spanish football until quite recently. And look, they've got, I reckon there's 3 things here, right? There's needle, and there's historical needle as well between these. You kind of need that. There's also a dearth of other rivals. If you look at the Premier League, there's a lot of big rivalry, some new, some old, and they kind of get bums on seats and people to watch. No one would be thinking about Liverpool and Man City being rivals 15 years ago, but they certainly are now, and they'll get some of the biggest audiences in world football watching this fixture, partly because, or a lot because they're at the top of the Premier League. And that's the other point. Each of these games has a weight to it, a competitive weight. These points, every point matters because one of these teams is going to win the league. So you've got this as well, and and then the kind of historical nature of who these teams are as well. The story of Barca and the story of Real, and some of it, obviously over dramatized for our world, modern world now. And then the other element is the stanification of it all on social media, whether it was Ronaldo v Messi or Barca and Real. The most comments I tend to get about articles when you write about, particularly about Barcelona, and you get the hordes coming in there, and they've got an army of loyal people following them from all over the world as well. I mean, the nature of their fandom and how kind of engrossed they are in their teams, whether in Nigeria or Dubai or US or wherever, they've got this real passionate following, and it's huge. So yeah, quite a long way of saying, John, you're right. I think this is the biggest domestic club game in world football for a number of reasons. I don't think, though, it's as big as it was, and we can get into that later.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We talk about that almost golden age of La Liga. Remember the Rivaldo goal, the overhead kick? That was.
I went there. I was there.
You were there. Well, that was to get a Champions League place, though, wasn't it? It wasn't to win the title. It was, and that shows you how competitive that league was at that point.
Completely randomly as well. My brother and I were in Barcelona. So, oh, there's a game on tonight. Should we go? And some bloke sold us a ticket outside the ground. And it was the most incredible game of football I've ever seen. You're right. Barcelona needed to win. Valencia needed not to lose to get the last Champions League spot. And I think there was a ball from Frank de Boer that Rivaldo chested at the edge of the penalty area and did this overhead kick. And it was just an incredible ending. My brother told me, he said, there's going to be a pitch invasion in a minute. We were in our teens. And he goes, I could sense a pitch invasion. Referee's whistle goes, we're all on the field. It was a magical evening.
Wow. Yeah. We say, get Libero. We're there. That's the thing, isn't it? I didn't know that, Terry. That's fantastic. Let's talk a bit, Jonathan, as you've written a book about this, as you have most subjects in football, about that rivalry. The 1960s, obviously, at the start of the 60s, Real Madrid are dominant, but there is a great Barcelona team as well, isn't there? Like Kubala, Luis Suarez, the original. You go to the 70s, you've got Johan Cruyff. In the 1980s, there's Terry Venables pulling off a Clasico victory with Gary Lineker. In the 90s, it's about the time it started being televised here. I remember back in my university days, those of us that were sort of proto-football hipsters getting very excited about watching Ronaldo against Dabo Suker. I remember, again, from that golden era, a game when Riquelme was at Barcelona, which didn't really work out, but there was a 0-0. And this shows you how big this fixture was. I was in a pub in Hammersmith, and it was absolutely rammed. And it was about 2000, 2001, just to watch this 0-0 fixture. It really did take off, though we get to the golden era. But what's your take on this fixture over the years?
I think this links into the point you made earlier that Real Madrid and Barcelona winning all the time is not normal.
Yeah.
Barcelona were historic until sort of the 90s, maybe even slightly after that. They were a slightly underperforming giant who had this great history. They managed to sort of, read Sid Lowe's book or look at the episode he did, or if it was what it was with us, on whether it's actually true that they were sort of this sort of anti-Francoist force and whether Real Madrid really were the Francoist team. It's much more complicated than many people make out. But equally, that imbues the rivalry with this very obvious, very easily understood history. Yeah, certainly the perception of Barcelona, the self-perception, the self-image was they were the rebel team fighting the evil regime, and that was what held them back. But I basically had that Kubala Suarez team of the 50s and 60s, and then they had so little success. I mean, even Cruyff only won one league title there as a player, and that's why Venables coming in and winning. I mean, that was their first title in 12 years, I think, when they won it.
Yeah, since Cruyff,
and then obviously. Yeah, it was the first since Cruyff. Yeah, so Cruyff won it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's 11 or 12 years, and that's why when they then get to the European Cup final and lose to Steaua in Spain, in Seville, that's why that's such a big deal, because Barcelona hadn't won it, and Real Madrid is obviously a huge part of their mythos. They'd won the 5 in a row. They won again in '66, and I think it's only fairly recently the sort of psychological after effects of that have worn off. I think. One of the reasons Guardiola has had this sort of very strained relationship with the Champions League is, he was famous. He was a ball boy at the semi-final when they came from 3-0 down to draw with EFK Gothenburg and then won on penalties to get to the final in '86. And then they still don't win it. And this sort of sense of, we'll never win it. It's not for us. That's why '92, when they beat Sampdoria at Wembley, why that is such a big moment. But I think that conditioning, Guardiola grew up in that. And so the sense of the Champions League or the European Cup as this sort of this distant thing that it's just slightly out of reach the whole time. I think that's why he's why the whole overthinking thing happened. That he was conditioned to believe this is something that will be snatched away from us, and that, of course, is all tied up in the relationship with Real Madrid because it was Real Madrid's competition. It was a huge game through that period. I mean, one of the very early sort of successful books of football literature was Jimmy Burns' book on Barcelona, which I think reinforced those ideas, which came out late 90s. I can't remember exactly when, but it's in that sort of first post-Cooper wave. And that, I think, conditioned a lot of people and sort of provided that sort of underpinning and background for things like you're talking about in 2001 of, the Clasico was the most accessible of the foreign games. We'd been introduced to foreign football by the Italian football on Channel 4, this sense of there is this other world out there. We can sort of engage with this. Yeah, Spanish football was on Sky, but by the late 90s, a lot of people were getting Sky, and that was part of the thing you were getting. You were getting this access to this incredible league. And there's also, do you remember that it was after Gary Lineker had been a player at Barcelona, but he sort of co-scripted a drama about an English footballer going to Barcelona.
Yeah.
And it made, I can't remember what it's called, but it made it seem incredibly glamorous. And this wasn't sort of, the thing I remember was sort of, there was just sort of a star in every position or multiple stars in every position. And the people competing to be centre forward or left back or whatever was like 4 internationals. And then you looked at our league and you had sort of a jobbing Norwegian journeyman, and that was as glamorous as it got. And then still a bit of a sort of the sort of the lingering after effects of the sort of comb over culture of sort of just sort of jobbing grifters. And then you looked at Spain, it seems impossibly glamorous, and that I think is absolutely been subverted now.
Yeah, it's a long way from the peachy Alonso era, isn't it? To where Barcelona became. Yeah, we must get, of course, to. I hesitate to call it a golden era, but it's the modern era, isn't it? It's Messi, Ronaldo, it's Jose v Pep, and it's a game that this one appeared. But me and some pals always joke about how the old firm appears to be on every week. Well, there was a point when the Clasico appeared to be on every week. I think back to some of those games. Gareth Bale's classic goal. But even though it was on all the time, the world did seem to stop for it. And that game, it just had that, Messi, Ronaldo, it was the focus of the world, wasn't it?
It was. And it's kind of because they all counted as well. They're always for something. And it wasn't like, oh, these guys are just playing again. And I was mentioning it earlier, the level of needle. My goodness, like it was at a peak. Pepe, and you got Jose Mourinho doing whatever he was doing on the side, and the players, they really didn't like each other throughout that period. Particularly that 3 years, the Mourinho Guardiola period, I think is peak any derby rivalry, whatever happened in the modern times. Because the only thing we didn't get is a Champions League final. I think that would have just blown it. I think that would have been too much for everyone. Yeah, those moments were the shithousery, the quality, the drama, and then the storylines behind it as journalists as well. You love storylines, and then if you want to go make it longer, like stretch it out a bit, I just can't imagine another time. I don't think it will ever happen again. So we probably have to appreciate. You don't appreciate it in the moment. It's 9 years. You have Messi on one team and Ronaldo on the other team. Going toe to toe, firing haymakers at each other. The world took a side, either this one or that one, and it was a wonderful, incredible, tense. It had everything, very dramatic rivalry, and it was great for La Liga, great for Spanish football, great for us as people who are watching this stuff.
Yeah, you're right to talk about the storylines as well, because I increasingly think that what makes football popular. It's not just the football; it's the soap opera element, and that's. I think the Premier League is incredibly good at that, and I'm not sure it's deliberately done that, but every week it feels you could pick a very easy storyline for each of the 20 clubs, at least one storyline, and that's one of the reasons why everybody's talking about it on the Monday and the Tuesday. It's sort of whether you're a Brentford fan or a United fan, there's something going on that is of relevance, and the stories advance another stage with that weekend's game. You talk about the needle. Mourinho poking his finger in Tio Villanova's eye. It was a super copper. It wasn't even a game that mattered. It was a charity shield. Like, And that Charity Shield, it seemed like appointment viewing. Oh, we've got to watch this because it was so toxic and so sulfuric. And I'm sure that people like Sid, I'm sure it's utterly exhausting following it, and the grief you get, whatever you wrote, people accusing you of being a fan of one side or the other. But I think the apogee was that the 4 games in 17 days in 2011 when they met in the league in the Copa del Rey, plus the 2 legs of the Champions League semi. And that was just extraordinary. That was like a TV miniseries of like 4 episodes, and each time there's a huge sort of apocalyptic feel to it. And even though, you look back at it, Guardiola wins in the sense that they win the league that season, they get through the Champions League semi, but Mourinho wins the game in the cup, and that's the start of Mourinho undermining Guardiola. That's his first blow he lands. So weirdly, even though Guardiola is the ostensible victor, actually it's Mourinho. And that's famously where Guardiola cracks and for the first time lashes back. And there's all this sort of, the Barcelona players were watching the press conference sort of on their feet applauding, going, oh yeah, go on Pep. That was Pep losing. That was Mourinho dragging him down to his level. And the fact that I still feel excited talking about it now, 15 years on, 14 years on, that was as good as football will ever get, maybe? Like in terms of just a rivalry, in terms of something that everybody wants to watch.
Just a quick, again, this is not my area, but we've got an expert here again. There's the stylistic difference as well, the tactical difference. They played completely different football as well. I thought that kind of added to it as me as a viewer. And like, how much of a big deal was that, do you reckon?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I meant to say that and forgot. You're quite right. The fact that the styles were so different, that Real Madrid was so much more based on individuals, Barcelona was so much more based on the team, despite having Messi, maybe the greatest individual the game's ever known. And it was very, very easy to pick your team. Like, which sort of football did you prefer? Which, if you sort of said, I'm not a fan of either, but I slightly favour this team, that said a lot about who you were as a person, what your belief systems were, what you valued. And that, of course, is a huge part of the soap opera, that it's big, easily understood themes. And I remember, when would it have been? I think it was 2012, so just after the peak years. I know I was in Rome playing cricket against the Vatican, and we got an audience with the Pope. And I was under pressure to write a column. So I was sitting there in St. Peter's Square on my laptop, smashing out this piece on Mourinho. And in that environment with all the statues and everything all around, this sort of, that's when I first made the comparison between Mourinho and Satan in Paradise Lost, of this charismatic but force of darkness. And it's true, that's what he was. But the fact that comparison, I think, is valid, that it's not ridiculous, suggests just how fundamental the issues raised by that fixture were.
Should we take a break there now and talk about something of not the downfall of the Clasico, but the slide down from the golden years, after the peak years? Here's some funky music for you. Welcome back. Jonathan and Tariq are still with me here. So, the Clasico, is it still all that? Well, of course it is. It's still a great fixture. It's still full of great players. But it's simple as saying departure of those stars, Messi, Ronaldo in particular, has taken down the brand a bit. In the years since, I mean, the thing is, Real Madrid kept winning the Champions League and Barcelona came off their axis. And in the UK here, this may be different around the world, La Liga is no longer on the mainstream channels. It's not on Sky. It's one of those things where you've got to go on, what they call OTT channels to access. And you're back down to those 2 big games a season to sustain it. And I suppose of the 2 clubs, Barcelona are those that have suffered most financially. We've had a story the last week or so about how Real Madrid are thinking of changing their model to bring in outside investment. But Barcelona, that's been a soap opera, hasn't it, Tariq, of financial, well, intrigue. Let's put it that way. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, the club has been a complete basket case, really, off the field, at least about the last 3-4 years. Post COVID, Juan Laporta, when he came in for his second spell as president, and I think was it 2022, he described it as being technically bankrupt. And I think he had a point. The debt was over €1 billion, losses nearly 400. I mean, these numbers are crazy. 400 million in losses. A club that has completely lost its way in trying to keep up, weirdly, in the modern era. And one of the reasons for Barcelona's demise is one of the reasons why everyone loved them so much as well, and it's in the figure of Lionel Messi. They produce from their own ranks a player the world may never see again, probably won't. This type of talent, the type of football he played as well, was very unique to him certainly in this modern age, that this guy can do what he was doing. And it cost a lot of money. Messi knew his worth. His dad, Jorge, certainly knew his son's worth. And Barcelona end up paying extraordinary amounts in order to keep Messi in their football club, a club that he loved and wanted to stay at as well, of course. But the reality of football finance, you have this era, and there's a counterfactual probably to be done, probably not today, but if Qatar and the UAE don't land in football, what would have been the effect on Barcelona? I think they're the ones that suffered the most as a result of this. And by that, I mean, there's this massive inflationary push on wages that particularly Qatar through PSG and also Man City with the UAE and Sheikh Mansour have done. And the amounts they ended up paying Messi, there was a 4-year contract that was inked for 500, I used a inked there, football term, 555 million euros for 4 years for Messi. And it's mad. And the reason to do it obviously is really good. But the impact of that is they end up paying people like Piqué, Jordi Alba, Busquets, his mates, this crazy amount of money. And Barca are just spending this kind of salary that they couldn't afford. Real Madrid don't do this, by the way. When you're comparing the two, Real Madrid are, for whatever you think of them, are really tightly run as a football club. Of course, there's that story from the past where they benefit from state help and all of the things like that. But comparing the two, Barcelona is a clown show, both under Bartomeu, the regime then, and I would argue, and we can get into this with Laporta now, it's about success today because I'm the president, I want to be remembered. Whatever happens tomorrow is somebody else's problem.
But I think there's also an element of that is the insecurity they continue to feel beside Real Madrid. Real Madrid have the self-confidence to say, players want to play for us. Like we can be sensible in our financing. Barcelona are terrified of losing players. And of course, that was only exacerbated by losing Neymar precisely because of that Qatari investment you're talking about. And that really is the one single moment that dragged Barcelona down, that Neymar is plucked from them, that this release clause of 220 million euros that everybody at the time thought was insane. They know he's going to pay that. They more than double the world record transfer fee. The world record transfer fee, if you look at its progress, basically from the 1890s, where, to be honest, the figures I'm slightly skeptical of, but once it's we can be confident in the numbers, it goes up in a fairly steady line. And then suddenly there's this massive leap as Neymar goes to PSG. That's not because football suddenly exploded. It's not because there's been this sudden sort of natural inflation. It's because this totally artificial agent has been injected into the game, that suddenly there's financial doping, to use the term Wenger used, but that is it. And Barcelona's response then, as we've discussed this before, is to panic. And they panic by going off and spending out 222 million euros on Coutinho and Dembele, who weren't the right players for them at the time. But also this inflationary wage spiral because they're terrified of Messi leaving. And I think the great story there which is in Josh Robinson's book about the Messi Ronaldo era, that Messi has always loved playing with Angel Di Maria, who at the time was at PSG. And so Jorge Messi, his dad, goes to Barcelona and says, can you get Angel down here? And the club don't want to say no because you don't say no to the Messis. So they sort of offer 30 million euros to PSG, knowing it'll be rejected. And then they go back to Jorge Messi, well, we've offered 30 million, they said no. And Jorge Messi's response is, well, it's great, you've got 30 million euros spare, give it to Lionel. And so they do.
If we play, they're funny you should mention that PSG transfer as well. It's actually, the way it was born as well is really intriguing, because it was this game, I think it was in 2017, PSG have beaten Barcelona 4-0 at Parc des Princes in the Champions League. And Barcelona have to do something extraordinary in the return leg and the Camp Nou, and they do. It's that what's it called, remontada, the comeback, the
6-1,
the 6-1. And in that game, Barcelona scored 3 goals, I think, in the last 4 minutes or the last 5 minutes of this match. I mean, it's extraordinary. And Neymar was the instigator of the comeback.
His best game for Barca, yeah.
This was his moment. This is the day that he is Barcelona's man. Only that he wasn't, because papers the next day have everywhere this one photo, and it's an iconic picture. It's Lionel Messi in the crowd with his arms outstretched. And for the Neymars as well, I mean, ego plays a big part, and everyone wants to be the man. And don't forget,
Neymar, Miguel's a nightmare for that.
Neymar, Messi's got a very busy dad as well, Neymar Senior. And it's at that moment PSG decide, we're going to get this guy. We're going to take this guy. And there's a meeting in the Barcelona, the club. There's Messi and Neymar, and I think Suarez there as well. And they're saying to Neymar, you got to stay. Come on, stay. And Messi's telling Neymar, look, I'll help you get the Ballon d'Or. Just stay. But he doesn't, and he goes to PSG for that world record transfer fee. And then Barcelona end up doing what they did. And there's just one more anecdote with this, is how they ended up spending the money. One of the players they bought, as well as Coutinho, was Dembele. And I think I've said it before on one of these other pods. It's just a mad story. They've got a couple of days to do this transfer. They go to Monte Carlo to meet the Borussia Dortmund directors, or in a hotel around the Champions League draw. And Bartomeu is in a lift with, I think, Raul Sanlahi at the time. And they agree their maximum fee for this player is 80 million. Whatever we'll start at 60, we're going to 80, we're not going any higher. The two guys have a hug, and they're in. They knock on the door. The Dortmund guy said, right, we've got 10 minutes here. We've got to catch a plane. The price is 120. Okay. Bartomeu takes the deal at 120. And I went, what happened to we hugged, we decided that was a fee. And he said, I could not return to Barcelona without this player. The fans, the members would have had me out. And that speaks to how this club runs as well. That the fact is, these presidents are so terrified of this populist fervor as well, of being the Barcelona president. It's very easy to spend other people's money. And he's done that. And this player has arrived, and and it's interesting now, Dembele has just been made Ballon d'Or, probably 6 years too late for the guys who bought him in Barcelona.
I think it was Sergio Roberto, wasn't it, that scored the winner in the remontada. I was going to compare him to Pichi Alonso, but now I'm comparing Dembele to Seth Johnson. the famous P. Riddy story, Libero Bassam there. Should we talk about this nebulous topic that we occasionally talk about, football, the actual playing of the game? Jonathan, as the guru of all tactical football, let's look at those teams now. You've got Xabi Alonso, who is, the chaps talked about this on the previous pod, the systems manager, going to Real Madrid. Is that a fit? And then you've got Hansi Flick, who is something of a German Ange in his tactics, isn't he? They just go at it with better players, it has to be said. What do you think about the fit of those two managers?
you hint at the question. I think you're right that Alonso doesn't seem a natural fit for Real Madrid. I mean, obviously a former Real Madrid player and very popular there, but Real Madrid in recent history has been a team of stars and egos, and Ancelotti was very good at getting them to. He was very good at getting brilliant people to do something brilliant at exactly the right moment. Normally, it's sort of the 92nd minute of a Champions League knockout tie when they're a goal behind, and this is very different. And it'll be. It's not a natural fit, and you would assume there'd be a tension there. But with the exception of the Madrid derby this season, where they lost 5-2, they've been very, very good, I think. They didn't look particularly good at the Club World Cup. I mean, was it 4-0 they lost to PSG at the Club World Cup? But I mean, I guess he'd just taken over, hadn't really any time there. Who knows how seriously teams were taking that tournament. And then Hansi Flick is a throwback. He's absolutely from that Stuttgarter Schüler, early Jurgen Klopp era, push as high as he can, which produces astonishingly watchable football, as we saw in the Champions League semi-finals, but doesn't necessarily produce winning football, which we saw with his Germany side. And I personally think playing a line that high and that relentlessly, that recklessly, has always been hugely dangerous. You get away with it when you're Bayern manager because you're way better than everybody else. Trying to do that against teams who can have a go at you is much harder. But I think particularly now that the game has moved on by readopting the principles of English football in the 1980s. I suspect that's doomed to failure. But they're certainly watchable, and they've also had a good season, with the exception, one obvious exception, which is that 4-1 defeat to Sevilla, who I have to say I had not realised until speaking to River players who played under him when he got promoted in 2012, that the manager of Sevilla is Matias Almeida, who is a really interesting thing. I didn't know any of it. Had terrible problems with depression. That's why he left River in 2012.
Yeah,
having gotten promoted, and he's back, and everybody who played for him says he is a great coach. So I mean, that's not really what we're talking about, but it is an interesting sort of side story.
Yeah. It feels to me for Real Madrid that main character energy, that's gone to Mbappe, hasn't it? He's won the battle with Vinicius Jr.
Yeah.
He's the franchise player now. Let's talk about Barcelona. And you do wonder why they don't stick to the principles that make the club great. I mean, they're rescued by La Masia, aren't they? Without which they would be in a terrible mess after all these pulling of levers and finance and all the rest of it. I was looking at the team that they played with the Guardiola derby. They played Girona at the weekend. They had a player, Tony Fernandez, and I think I worked out, I might be wrong here, he's the first player to be born, and he was born after Pep was appointed in May 2008. But there's also got Dro Fernandez, who is unrelated, but he played in the game on Tuesday in the Champions League against Olympiacos, which was a very easy win. And then there's Guia Fernandez, who plays for the B team. He's the cousin of Tony Fernandez. And then, of course, you've got this star who may well be the next Messi. We'll wait to see. Things don't always work out. You've got Lamal, and they've got their franchise player from within. And it feels like sticking to what Barcelona do best is what they should do.
Again, they've got their franchise player from within, the generation after Messi. The same, coming in from the same side as well. It's uncanny that this is the guy that could be, it looks like he will be, the man. And it's a really interesting point, is La Masia saved them. And yet, when Joan Laporta came in for his second spell, the club was in the throes of this financial chaos, or technically bankrupt, or whatever it is that he said. So what did he do? He ended up doubling down and spending even more money. And it didn't make any sense to me.
It's pure Keynesianism. Spend your way out of crisis.
Yeah, but we love stories. We talk about how much we love stories. What a great story it would have been. The ashes of bankruptcy. We've built this team through our own hard work, endeavor, through La Masia, and here we come. He bought Robert Lewandowski. He was like 34. Gave Bayern Munich this great sum of money. I think they're still paying it off as we're reading this week. Clubs owing money. They're Rafinha from Leeds, who's done a great job there. But again, they owe Leeds 40 million odd quid still for that. I was just thinking, I remember talking to him at the time, I was like, I don't understand this. And one thing he's really good at, Laporta, is he's a great communicator, really bombastic. And he's using these euphemisms like levers and things like that. I would say mortgaging the future, but you're not going to say that. If you're him, you'd rather say levers, basically giving up vast chunks of your future income so you can effectively spend money in the transfer market. But what a great story it would have been. And not just the players you mentioned, there's Pau Kobasi there, the central defender. 80, it just looks immense, this central defender they found. Balde, the left back, all from
Fermin
inside.
Lopez.
Fermin Lopez got a hat-trick in Champions League this week we're recording. Now, what a great story that would have been. And what a great way to rescue the club's finances by saying, we're going to do this our way. And the other thing that I found interesting in talking to him, I said, why are you doing this? So, well, we have to win. We did an episode on DNA right at the start of when we started doing Libero, I think. I don't think that if you look at the long arc of Barcelona, having to win every season, every tournament is a relatively new thing. I think for me, the Barcelona story is what you've just described, that this conveyor belt of wonderful talent that comes through and then wins and helps the club win is the Barcelona story, which is slightly different. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I was going to ask you. I mean, you mentioned you spoke to Laporta. You've spoken to a few big figures in football over the years, Tariq. How does he compare? He was introduced to us in the UK with this documentary back in 2004. Do you remember this? I think it was called The Project, which is very of its time. And he was quite a very slick individual, and it was him and his buddies, sorting out Barcelona. I think it was the time they bought Edgar Davids in. Remember that Edgar Davids is seen as this catalytic player on the rest of Barcelona's history, and it was the Rijkaard team. Has he changed over the years? Is it was a bombastic figure there, isn't there?
Yeah, I think even then, if you remember right at the start, he came in with this crew of very young managerial executives, but they quickly all fell out with each other. Sandro Rosell was booted out, then he came back, and another guy, and this is another part of the Barca story that we haven't got time to get into today. There's like the beauty on the field, and there is this incredible beauty about what's happening on the field and walking into the new camp and all of this. It is a lovely experience.
We haven't even got time to talk about the fact that the new camp, you can't walk into it. So
not at the moment. But there's always there's been this underbelly of murkiness as well.
Yeah.
Like throughout this era. And Laporta is a figure that fits into this. He was there at the start, as you said in that documentary. They all fell out. There was questions about his management after he left as well. The business deals with whoever and wherever. And now he's in this position now. And I found him as someone who is, and again, a lot of people who want to be presidents of anything, they're going to have a level of ego. And it all feels like a little bit about him. This is my moment and I want to be remembered, and whatever happens in the future is going to be somebody else's problem. Now, if you're thinking about these football clubs, and Miguel's talked about them as social institutions, local, very important for the local community, and they're supposed to stand the test of time. You have these figures who come in, and yeah, you might win a trophy or two, but the damage they can wreak in that period they're in power can be there for decades after they've gone. And I'm looking at some of the decisions that Joan Laporta has made, whether it is selling these assets, whether it's partnering with certain companies, certain individuals that are questionable, and the stain on the reputation of Barcelona that will linger as a result of some of this after he's gone. And I always wonder, is it worth it? Because you have so much going for you as FC Barcelona. You have so much talent coming through. Do you really need to, look like a secondhand car dealer on the way to doing what it is you're trying to do? I'm not sure it's worth it.
I think that's a good point to close us out there. I think you'd agree there, Jonathan, as the author of, is it the Barcelona Legacy? Is that your...
It depends whether you got it in the UK or the US, so either the Barcelona Legacy or the Barcelona Inheritance. But yeah, I mean, it's the Borgias, isn't it? That awful people produce great art.
No better way to finish it than that, Jonathan. You've rounded it off perfectly. Thank you for listening to the 64th edition of Libero. Like and subscribe, get on the comments page, all the rest of it. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Jonathan. Thanks to Tariq. Thanks as ever to Tom and you.